Darnell Jackson pushed his cleaning cart down the empty hallway of the Oakwood Corporate Plaza. The building was quiet at this late hour. Most people had gone home hours ago. The only sounds were the soft hum of the air conditioning and the squeak of his cartwheels. Darnell had worked as a janitor in this building for 15 years. At 52 years old, his dark hair now had streaks of gray. His hands were strong but showed signs of years of hard work. He knew every corner of this 30-story building. He cleaned each floor night after night while the city slept outside. It was Friday evening and a heavy storm raged outside. Rain pounded against the large windows and lightning flashed across the dark sky. Darnell hummed an old gospel tune as he mopped the shiny floor of the executive level. He liked working at night. The quiet gave him time to think and remember. He thought about his late wife, Marlene. It had been 5 years since cancer took her away. He thought about his 2 grown children, Lisa, a nurse in Chicago, and Kevin, who was trying hard to stay in community college while working 2 jobs. Darnell was proud of them both. As he finished mopping near the conference rooms, a loud crash followed by a painful groan broke the silence. Darnell stopped. He stood still and listened. Another groan came from behind the door of conference room. Hello, is someone there?" Darnell called out, putting down his mop. When he heard another sound of pain, Darnell quickly opened the door. Inside, he found a white man in an expensive suit lying on the floor. A chair was turned over beside him. The man was holding his ankle and grimacing in pain. "Sir, are you all right?" Darnell asked, rushing to the man's side. The man looked up, surprised to see anyone else in the building. He was in his late 40s with thinning brown hair and wore a suit that probably cost more than Darnell made in a month. I slipped," the man said through clenched teeth. "I think I hurt my ankle pretty bad." Darnell knelt down beside him. "Let me help you. I'm Darnell Jackson. I work here as a janitor." The man nodded, his face tight with pain. "Frank Porter. I work in investments on the 22nd floor." Darnell carefully helped Frank sit up. "What are you doing here so late, Mr. Porter?" Frank gestured to papers scattered across the conference table. "Big presentation tomorrow morning. Wanted to make sure everything was perfect." He tried to move his foot and winced. I stood on the chair to adjust the projector and it tipped over. "That doesn't look good," Darnell said, looking at the swelling ankle. "Can you stand?" Frank tried but shook his head. "Not without help." Darnell thought for a moment. "The building's empty except for night security downstairs. Let me help you to my car. You need to get that ankle checked at a hospital." Frank frowned. "I can call a cab or an Uber." "In this storm? You might wait an hour. And you'll still need help getting downstairs," Darnell said practically. "My car's in the underground parking. I can drive you to St. Mary's Hospital. It's only 10 minutes away." Frank looked uncertain. He glanced at Darnell's janitor uniform, then at his own expensive suit as if calculating something in his mind. Darnell noticed the look. He had seen it many times before, that moment when people saw only his job, not the man doing it. But he kept his face neutral. Over the years he had learned that actions spoke louder than words. "Your choice, Mr. Porter. But that ankle needs ice and a doctor's attention soon." After a moment, Frank nodded. "Thank you, I appreciate the help." Darnell helped Frank to his feet, or rather to his one good foot. Frank was heavier than he looked, and Darnell was glad for the strength he had built over years of physical work. He let Frank lean on him as they made their way to the elevator. "What about your cleaning work?" Frank asked as they waited for the elevator. "It'll be here tomorrow," Darnell replied with a small smile. "Some things are more important." As they rode down to the parking level, Darnell noticed Frank looking at him with curiosity. "Been working here long?" Frank asked. 15 years this December, Darnell answered. Frank raised his eyebrows. 15 years? You must have seen a lot of changes. People come and go, buildings stay the same, just need different kinds of care as they age. Like people, I suppose. The elevator doors opened to the parking garage. Darnell helped Frank to his old but well-maintained Ford sedan. Getting Frank into the passenger seat was a challenge, but they managed it. Darnell carefully placed Frank's expensive leather briefcase in the back seat. As Darnell drove out of the garage into the stormy night, Frank seemed uncomfortable with the silence. "So 15 years as a janitor here. Did you always want to do this kind of work?" Frank asked, his tone suggesting he couldn't imagine anyone choosing such a job. Darnell kept his eyes on the rain-slicked road. "Not always. I was in the army. For 12 years. Served as a medic, 2 tours in Afghanistan." Frank looked surprised. "A medic? That's unexpected." "Life takes unexpected turns," Darnell said simply. "After I came home, I needed quiet work. Something with order. Cleaning suits me fine." Frank fell silent, perhaps seeing Darnell in a different light. The rain hammered on the car roof as they drove through nearly empty streets. "You have family, Mr. Jackson?" Frank asked after a while. "Call me Darnell," he replied. "And yes, 2 grown kids. My wife passed 5 years ago." "I'm sorry to hear that," Frank said, and he seemed to mean it. "How about you? Anyone waiting at home worried about you?" Darnell asked. Frank shook his head. "Divorced. No kids. Work keeps me busy enough." They arrived at the emergency room entrance of St. Mary's Hospital. Darnell helped Frank inside, where a nurse quickly brought a wheelchair. "Will you be okay from here?" Darnell asked as the nurse prepared to take Frank to an examination room. Frank looked surprised. "You're not leaving, are you?" Darnell hadn't expected that. "I thought you'd want me to go." "Please stay," Frank said, and for the first time that night, he looked vulnerable. "At least until they tell me how bad it is, I don't like hospitals." Darnell nodded, understanding. Many people feared hospitals. He had seen enough suffering in field hospitals to understand why. "I'll stay," he promised. Hours later, Frank emerged from the examination room with his ankle wrapped and a pair of crutches. The doctor had confirmed it was a severe sprain, not a break. Frank would need to stay off it for at least 2 weeks. "Thank you for waiting," Frank said as Darnell helped him back to the car. "Most people wouldn't have bothered. Most people haven't seen what happens when nobody bothers," Darnell replied. In the car, Frank gave directions to his home, an expensive high-rise apartment building downtown. As they pulled up to the entrance, Frank seemed reluctant to leave. "Can I pay you for your time? For the gas and trouble?" he asked, reaching for his wallet. Darnell shook his head. "No need, just helping a person in need." Frank looked at him with genuine curiosity. "Why? You don't know me. I'm just some guy who was stupid enough to stand on a rolling chair." Darnell smiled slightly. "Because someone once helped me when I needed it most. That's how the world should work." He helped Frank out of the car into the building entrance where a doorman rushed to assist. Before Frank was wheeled inside, Darnell took out a scrap of paper and wrote down his phone number. "Call if you need anything else," he said, handing it to Frank. Frank looked at the paper, then at Darnell as if seeing something new. "I will," he said. "And thank you, Darnell Jackson. I won't forget this." As Darnell drove back to the office, building to finish his shift, he had no idea that this chance meeting would change both their lives forever. He didn't know that Frank Porter was not just any businessman but Franklin Porter III, the reclusive billionaire owner of Porter Investments, and the actual owner of the very building Darnell cleaned every night. Darnell simply knew he had helped someone who needed it, and for tonight that was enough. 3 days after helping Frank Porter to the hospital, Darnell was mopping the executive floor when he heard the now familiar sound of crutches on the polished floor. He looked up to see Frank making his way slowly down the hallway, his ankle still wrapped in a bandage. "Mr. Porter," Darnell said with surprise, "should you be back at work so soon?" Frank gave a small smile. "The doctor said to stay off it, but I have meetings I can't miss." He paused, leaning on his crutches. "And I wanted to thank you properly for your help the other night." Darnell waved his hand. "No need for thanks, just doing what anyone would do." "That's just it," Frank replied. "Not everyone would have done what you did. Most people would have called security or an ambulance and gone back to work." Darnell shrugged. "Maybe, but that's not how I was raised." Frank studied him for a moment. Do you have time for a coffee? The break room on this floor has a decent machine. Darnell checked his watch. He was ahead of schedule. I suppose I could take my break now. In the break room, they sat at a small table with steaming cups of coffee. For a moment, neither spoke. They were an odd pair, Frank in his expensive suit with his injured foot propped on a chair, and Darnell in his gray janitor uniform. You mentioned you were a medic in the army, Frank said finally. That must have been tough work. Darnell nodded. It was. 2 tours in Afghanistan. Saw things no one should have to see. He took a sip of his coffee. But I also saw incredible bravery. People at their best in the worst situations. Is that why you became a medic? To help people? My grandfather was a medic in Vietnam. He taught me that saving lives was the only honorable part of war. Darnell's eyes grew distant with memory. I was good at it. Had steady hands even when the world was exploding around us. Frank leaned forward. So how did you end up here, cleaning floors instead of saving lives? Darnell's face showed a flicker of pain before returning to its usual calm. When I came home after my second tour, I couldn't sleep. Loud noises made me jump, crowds made me nervous, the doctors called it PTSD. He looked down at his coffee. I tried working as an EMT, but every time I heard sirens or saw blood, I was back in Afghanistan. My wife Marlene suggested I find something quiet for a while, something with routine. The janitorial position opened up and it fit. 15 years later, I'm still here. Frank nodded thoughtfully. And your wife? You said she passed away? Cancer, 5 years ago. By the time they caught it, it was too late. Darnell's voice was steady, but his eyes showed his loss. We had good insurance through my job here, but there were still bills. Experimental treatments insurance wouldn't cover. I'm still paying them off. I'm sorry, Frank said, and he seemed to truly mean it. Darnell looked up at Frank. What about you? You said you're divorced? Frank nodded. 10 years now. Clara and I married young. I was focused on building my career and she got tired of being alone. Can't blame her, really. He shifted in his seat. No kids, just me and my work. Must be lonely, Darnell observed. Frank looked surprised at Darnell's directness. Then he gave a small laugh. Yes, I suppose it is. I have colleagues, not friends. People see my position, not me. What exactly do you do here? Darnell asked. Frank hesitated. I'm in investments. I analyze companies, decide where to put money. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. Franklin Porter III didn't just analyze investments. He owned Porter Investments, the company that owned this building and many others. Sounds important, Darnell said. Some would say so. Frank sipped his coffee. Tell me about your children. You mentioned you have 2? Darnell's face brightened. Lisa and Kevin. Lisa's a nurse in Chicago. She takes after her mother. Smart, kind, stubborn when she needs to be. Kevin's younger, 22. He's in community college studying engineering. Works 2 jobs to pay for it. Frank noticed how Darnell sat straighter when he talked about his children. You're proud of them. Every day. They've had it harder than some, easier than others. They work hard. Try to do right. Darnell checked his watch. Speaking of work, I should get back to mine. As they stood to leave, Frank seemed reluctant to end the conversation. I'll be working late again on Thursday. Maybe we could talk more. Then? Darnell looked surprised but nodded. I'm here every weeknight from 10 to 6. That Thursday and several nights after, Frank found reasons to stay late at the office. Each time he and Darnell would share coffee and conversation. Frank learned about Darnell's childhood in Detroit, his 12 years of military service, and the struggles and joys of raising his children as a single father after Marlene died. Darnell, in turn, learned that Frank had grown up in Boston, attended Harvard Business School, and worked 80-hour weeks. What Frank didn't reveal was his true identity or wealth. For the first time in decades, someone was talking to Frank the person, not Franklin Porter III, the billionaire. 2 weeks after their first meeting, Frank arrived at the office with just a small brace on his ankle, no longer needing crutches. He found Darnell cleaning the windows in the main conference room. "Ankles better?" Darnell asked, noticing Frank's improved mobility. "Much better, thanks to your advice about icing it regularly." Frank paused. "I need to ask you something. Your son Kevin, you mentioned he's struggling to stay in school while working 2 jobs?" Darnell nodded, his face showing concern. "It's getting harder. His tuition went up, and his second job cut his hours. He's thinking about dropping out to work, full-time." He shook his head. "I send what I can, but with Marlene's medical bill still hanging over me." Frank nodded thoughtfully. "I might know of a scholarship program for children of veterans. Would it be okay if I passed his information along?" Darnell looked hopeful. "That would be wonderful. Are you sure it's not too much trouble?" "No trouble at all," Frank assured him. What Darnell didn't know was that Frank had already been researching Darnell's background. He had been deeply impressed by what he found. Multiple commendations for bravery during Darnell's military service, including a Bronze Star for saving 6 wounded soldiers under heavy fire. Frank had also discovered that Darnell volunteered at a homeless shelter on weekends and had never missed a day of work in 15 years, not even when his wife was ill. 3 days later, Kevin called his father, his voice excited. "Dad, you won't believe it. I just got a letter saying I've been awarded a Veterans Family Educational Grant. It covers full tuition and books for the rest of my degree. Did you know about this?" Darnell was stunned. "A man at work mentioned something about a scholarship program, but I had no idea it would be this much. Are you sure it's legitimate?" "It's real, Dad. The money's already been sent to the school. I checked with the financial aid office. They said it's from a foundation that helps veterans' families." Kevin's voice cracked with emotion. "I don't have to drop out. I can even quit one of my jobs and focus on school." After hanging up, Darnell sat on his sofa, overwhelmed with gratitude. He had never heard of this grant program, but it seemed Frank Porter had connections he hadn't mentioned. Next night at work, Darnell sought out Frank, finding him in his office on the 22nd floor. "My son Kevin got a grant," Darnell said without preamble. "A very generous one." Frank looked up from his computer, his face neutral. "That's wonderful news." He said it was from a foundation for veterans' families. Darnell studied Frank's face. "Strange that in all my years since leaving the service I never heard of such a foundation." Frank met his gaze steadily. "There are many private foundations that don't advertise widely. Your son earned it, I'm sure." Darnell wasn't fooled. "Did you do this?" Frank's expression softened. "I merely passed along information to the right people. Your service record speaks for itself, Darnell. Your son deserves an education without the burden of working himself to exhaustion." Darnell was quiet for a long moment. "Thank you," he said finally. "But I have to ask, who are you really, Frank Porter? You don't seem like any investment analyst I've ever met." Frank smiled slightly. "Let's just say I have some influence in certain circles. Now tell me more about what Kevin is studying." As they talked into the night, Darnell still didn't know the full truth about his new friend. But he sensed that Frank Porter was much more than he appeared to be. And for the first time since Marlene died, Darnell felt he had found a true friend, someone who saw him as a person of value, not just a man who cleaned floors in the night. What neither man realized was how quickly their unusual friendship would be tested, or how it would change both their lives forever. A month after Kevin received the mysterious grant, Darnell noticed something strange happening at Oakwood Corporate Plaza. Important-looking people in expensive suits were coming and going at all hours. There were closed-door meetings that ran late into the night. The employees seemed tense, speaking in whispers that stopped whenever Darnell walked by. One Tuesday evening, Darnell was emptying trash cans on the 22nd floor when he overheard 2 men talking in a nearby office. "The board meeting on Friday will be the end of Porter Investments as we know it," said a deep voice. "Franklin has lost his touch. He's been acting strangely for months now." "Do you really think they'll vote him out?" asked a second voice. "It's already decided. 7 of the 9 board members have agreed. Once Franklin is gone, we'll sell to Global Capital Partners. They're offering billions." "What about the employees?" "Global will keep the top executives." Everyone else is expendable, but that's business. The men laughed and Darnell quietly moved away. He didn't understand everything he had heard, but he knew it wasn't good. He wondered if Frank Porter knew what was happening. They had become friends over the past month, sharing coffee and conversations several nights each week. Frank had even visited Darnell's modest apartment for dinner once. Later that night, Darnell found Frank in his office, staring at his computer screen. Frank looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes. "Everything okay?" Darnell asked, placing a fresh cup of coffee on Frank's desk. Frank gave a weak smile. "Just work problems, Darnell, nothing for you to worry about." Darnell hesitated. "I heard some men talking earlier, about Porter Investments, about a board meeting on Friday." Frank's head snapped up, his eyes suddenly alert. "What exactly did you hear?" Darnell told him about the conversation. As he spoke, Frank's face grew grim. "I suspected as much," Frank said when Darnell finished. "They're moving faster than I thought." "Who's moving faster? What's going on, Frank?" Frank was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood up and closed his office door. "Sit down, Darnell. There's something I need to tell you." Darnell sat, feeling uneasy. Frank paced the room before speaking. "My name isn't just Frank Porter. It's Franklin Porter III. I don't just work for Porter Investments, I own it. This building and 40 others like it across the country belong to me." Darnell stared at him in shock. "You're the boss of everything?" Frank nodded. "I'm worth about $11 billion, according to Forbes magazine." He said it without pride, as if stating his height or weight. "Why didn't you tell me?" Darnell asked, trying to process this news. "Because for the first time in decades, someone was treating me like a normal person." Frank sat down heavily. "Do you know how rare that is for someone in my position? Everyone wants something from me: money, jobs, connections, status. But you just saw me as a guy with a sprained ankle who needed help." Darnell was still trying to understand. "So all this time I've been having coffee with a billionaire? You own the building I clean?" "Yes." Frank looked worried. "Are you angry?" Darnell thought for a moment. "I'm confused, and a little hurt that you didn't trust me with the truth. But I understand why you might keep it secret." He looked at Frank directly. "Was the grant for Kevin real, or was that just you giving us money?" "The foundation is real," Frank said. "I started it 5 years ago for families of veterans. But yes, I made sure Kevin got selected after I learned about his situation." He paused. "Are you upset about that?" Darnell sighed. "I've never been one to take handouts, but my son's education is more important than my pride. So thank you, I guess." They sat in silence for a moment. "What will happen at the board meeting on Friday?" Darnell finally asked. Frank's face darkened. "The board thinks I've lost my edge. They want to sell the company to foreign investors who will cut thousands of jobs to increase profits. I've been fighting it, but they've been working behind my back. Can they do that? Fire you from your own company?" "Unfortunately, yes. When the company went public 10 years ago, I kept only 30% of the shares. The board controls the rest." Frank ran a hand through his hair. "I never thought they'd turn on me like this." Darnell leaned forward. "So what will you do?" "I'm not sure yet. I have some ideas, but I'll need help." Frank looked at Darnell with new eyes. "In fact, I could use your help." "My help? What can a janitor do against billionaire businessmen?" Frank smiled for the first time that evening. "You're not just a janitor, Darnell. You're a decorated war veteran, a natural leader, and you know this building and the people in it better than anyone." He leaned forward. "Plus, you have something none of those board members have." "What's that?" "Integrity, and the respect of everyone who works here." Frank's eyes had a new energy. "Will you help me save this company and the jobs of 3,000 people who work for it?" Darnell thought about all the employees he had gotten to know over 15 years. The security guards who shared their lunch with him. The secretaries, who always said good morning. The maintenance workers who treated him like one of their own. They all had families, bills to pay, dreams for their children. "What do you need me to do?" he asked. Over the next 3 days, Darnell and Frank worked on their plan. During the day, Darnell made quiet visits to employees throughout the building. Security guards, administrative assistants, cafeteria workers, and maintenance staff. He asked questions, listened to concerns, and made notes on who was truly dedicated to the company. At night, he met with Frank in his office, sharing what he had learned. Frank was amazed at how much Darnell knew about the company's daily operations, things the executives never saw from their corner offices. The real power of any organization isn't in the boardroom, Darnell explained. It's with the people who keep things running day after day. Thursday night, the eve of the board meeting, Frank asked Darnell to meet him at an unusual location, the company's records room in the basement. When Darnell arrived, Frank was surrounded by old boxes and files. "Look at this," Frank said, showing Darnell a dusty file. "When my father started this company 40 years ago, he wrote a special clause in the corporate charter. If the board tries to sell the company against the founder's wishes, a special vote can be called that includes all full-time employees." "All employees? Even the janitors and security guards?" "Everyone. One person, one vote." Frank smiled. "My father believed that a company belongs to all the people who build it, not just those who profit from it. The board members have forgotten this clause or think I don't know about it." Darnell nodded slowly. "So you need the employees to vote against selling the company. But how will you convince them? Most have never even met you." "That's where you come in," Frank said. "They may not know me, but they know and respect you. If you stand with me tomorrow and tell them what's at stake, they'll listen." Darnell looked uncertain. "I'm just the night janitor, Frank." "No," Frank said firmly. "You're much more than that, and tomorrow everyone will see it." The next morning, for the first time in 15 years, Darnell Jackson put on a suit instead of his janitor uniform. It was his only suit, the one he wore, to Marlene's funeral and Lisa's nursing school graduation. Frank had sent a car to pick him up and bring him to the office. When he arrived, the lobby was filled with confused employees. Security guards Darnell had known for years did a double-take when they saw him in a suit. Administrative assistants whispered as he walked by. No one had ever seen Darnell during daylight hours. On the top floor, Frank was waiting outside the boardroom. He looked different today, confident and powerful in a perfectly tailored suit. This was Franklin Porter III, the billionaire CEO, not the Frank Porter that Darnell had come to know. "Ready?" Frank asked. Darnell took a deep breath. "Ready." Together they walked into the boardroom where 9 board members sat around a large table. The men and women fell silent when they saw Frank. Their eyes widened when they saw Darnell. "Franklin, what is the meaning of this?" asked an older man at the head of the table. "And why is the janitor here?" Frank smiled coldly. "George, I'd like you to meet Darnell Jackson. He's not here as a janitor today. He's here as my newly appointed Chief of Personnel Operations." The board members looked shocked. Darnell stood tall beside Frank, feeling strange in his new role but determined to do his part. "Before we begin this meeting," Frank announced, "I'm invoking Section 12, Paragraph 3 of the original corporate charter, the Founders' Protection Clause. I've called a company-wide vote on the proposed sale to take place immediately following this meeting." The room erupted in angry shouts. The board members had not expected this move. As the chaos swirled around them, Frank leaned close to Darnell and whispered, "This is just the beginning. Are you still with me?" Darnell nodded. All the way. Neither man knew exactly what would happen next, but both knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The boardroom was in chaos. The 9 board members of Porter Investments shouted and argued as Frank stood calmly at the head of the table. Darnell remained beside him, feeling out of place in his funeral suit, but determined not to show it. "This is outrageous," shouted George Harmon, the board chairman. His face was red with anger. "You can't just make the janitor an executive." "I just did," Frank replied coolly. "And Mr. Jackson is no ordinary janitor. He's a decorated war veteran with a Bronze Star for valor. He knows this company from the ground up, which is more than I can say for some of you." An older woman with silver hair spoke up. "Franklin, be reasonable. Global Capital Partners is offering $17 billion for the company. That's a 30% premium over our current market value. As CEO, you have a duty to the shareholders. My duty, Helen, is to the entire company, Frank answered. Not just the shareholders, but the 3,000 people who work here. People whose jobs would disappear if this sale goes through. That's business, said a younger man with slicked back hair. Companies get sold, people lose jobs, others find new ones, the market adjusts. Darnell couldn't stay silent any longer. With all due respect, sir, people aren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. They're real human beings with families and bills and dreams. His voice was quiet but firm. When you talk about the market adjusting, you're talking about children who might not go to college, homes that might be lost, and lives that will be damaged. The board members stared at Darnell as if a piece of furniture had suddenly started talking. And who exactly are you to lecture us on business? The young man sneered. I'm someone who has worked in this building for 15 years, Darnell answered. I know Mary in accounting who's putting her twins through college. I know Steve in security who takes care of his elderly mother. I know Rosa who cleans the cafeteria at night and sends money home to her family in El Salvador. He looked around the table. Do any of you know these people? Do you even know their names? The room fell silent. Frank broke the silence. The company-wide vote will begin in 1 hour in the main auditorium. Each of you is welcome to make your case to the employees. He turned to leave, gesturing for Darnell to follow. This is a waste of time, George called after them. The employees will vote however you tell them to, Franklin. Frank paused at the door. You really don't understand what's happening here. Do you, George? I'm not the one they're going to listen to today. He nodded toward Darnell. He is. In the hallway outside, Darnell turned to Frank. What did you mean by that? Why would they listen to me? Because you're one of them, Darnell. You've worked alongside them for years. They trust you. Frank checked his watch. We have 1 hour to prepare. Are you ready to speak to 3,000 people? Darnell felt a wave of panic. I don't know, Frank. I've never spoken to a crowd before. Just speak from the heart like you did in there. Frank put a hand on Darnell's shoulder. Tell them what's at stake. Tell them the truth. An hour later, the company auditorium was packed with employees from every department. Administrative assistants sat next to executives. Maintenance workers stood along the walls. Security guards lined the back of the room. The air buzzed with confusion and worry. Frank took the stage first. A hush fell over the crowd. Good morning, he began. For those who don't know me personally, I'm Franklin Porter III, CEO of Porter Investments. He paused. I've recently learned that some members of our board of directors have been planning to sell this company to Global Capital Partners, a foreign investment group that plans to break up our company and eliminate thousands of jobs. Worried murmurs spread through the crowd. Fortunately, my father included a special clause in our company charter. It states that any sale of the company against the founder's wishes must be approved by a vote of all full-time employees. Frank looked out over the sea of faces. That means each of you has a voice in this decision. Each of you has a vote. The crowd grew louder. Frank raised his hand for quiet. Before you vote, I want to introduce someone many of you already know, someone who has worked in this building longer than most of you, someone who understands what this company really is. He gestured to the side of the stage. Please welcome Darnell Jackson, our new Chief of Personnel Operations. Darnell walked onto the stage, feeling thousands of eyes on him. He recognized many faces in the crowd, people he had nodded to in hallways, whose offices he had cleaned, whose trash he had emptied for years. That's the night janitor, someone said loudly. Yes, Darnell said into the microphone, his voice stronger than he expected. I am, or was, the night janitor. For 15 years I've cleaned this building while most of you were home with your families. I've emptied your trash cans, cleaned your bathrooms, and mopped your floors. He took a deep breath. But I've also watched this company grow. I've seen people come in as interns and rise to manage departments. I've seen the lights on late at night when you were all working to meet deadlines. I've found pictures of your children on your desks and birthday cards from your colleagues in your trash. Darnell's voice grew more confident. I know this company, in ways that the board members don't. I know that Susan in Human Resources brings homemade cookies every Friday. I know that Bill from IT fixed the heating system last winter when it broke at midnight and everyone else had gone home. I know that many of you put extra coins in the vending machine so the next person gets a free snack. He looked out at the now silent crowd. What makes Porter Investments special isn't the stock price or the profit margins. It's you, the people who come here every day and put your hearts into your work. It's the community you've built together. Darnell pointed to the back of the room where the board members stood watching. These board members want to sell that community to the highest bidder. They want to take the company that you built with your hard work and hand it over to people who see you as expenses to be cut. Angry murmurs rippled through the crowd. Mr. Porter has a different vision. He believes that this company belongs to all of us who build it day by day. He believes in investing in people, not just profits. Darnell smiled slightly. I know this because a month ago, my son received a scholarship from a foundation Mr. Porter created to help veterans' families. Darnell turned to Frank, who looked surprised that Darnell had shared this personal information. I didn't know at the time that he was the owner of this company. I just thought he was a kind man who cared about people. Darnell faced the crowd again. That's the kind of leadership this company needs. Someone who sees value in people, not just in dollars. He took a final deep breath. The choice is yours. You can vote to sell to global capital partners, take the quick money, and hope you're not one of the thousands who lose their jobs. Or you can vote to keep Porter Investments, independent, growing, and true to its founding values. Darnell stepped back from the microphone. The auditorium erupted in applause. George Harmon, the board chairman, stormed onto the stage. This is emotional manipulation, he shouted into the microphone. Porter Investments exists to create value for its shareholders. That's business, that's reality. A woman stood up in the middle of the crowd. Darnell recognized her as Mary from accounting, whose twins were in college. Mr. Harmon, she called out, I've worked here for 12 years. This company helped put my children through school. It's not just about shareholder value to me. It's my life. Others began to stand and share similar stories. Each person who spoke looked to Darnell with respect and gratitude, as if seeing him clearly for the first time. Frank stepped forward to the microphone. It's time to vote. Each of you has an electronic voting device at your seat. Press 1 to keep Porter Investments independent. Press 2 to sell to global capital partners. A tense silence fell over the room as people made their choices. After 5 minutes, Frank's assistant handed him a tablet with the results. Frank looked at the numbers, his face revealing nothing. He passed the tablet to Darnell, who looked down to see the results. 2,141 votes to remain independent. 259 votes to sell. Darnell handed the tablet back to Frank, who turned to the microphone. By a vote of 2,741 to 259, Porter Investments will remain independent. The room exploded with cheers and applause. People hugged each other, some with tears in their eyes. The board members stood in shocked silence at the back of the room. Frank raised his hands for quiet. This is just the beginning of a new chapter for our company, and it starts with recognizing the people who truly make this company work. He turned to Darnell, starting with this man right here. As the crowd cheered again, Darnell felt overwhelmed. Just a few months ago, he had been an invisible night janitor, cleaning floors while the world slept. Now he stood on stage beside a billionaire, having helped save a company and thousands of jobs. And somewhere deep inside, he knew Marlene would be proud. 1 year had passed since the dramatic vote that saved Porter Investments. Spring sunshine streamed through the windows of Darnell's new office on the 25th floor. He still found it strange to have an office with his name on the door. Darnell Jackson, Chief of Personnel Operations. Darnell looked out at the city below. So much had changed in a year. After the vote, Frank had restructured the board of directors, replacing those who had tried to sell the company. He had introduced profit sharing for all employees, from executives to janitors. He had started a company daycare center and education fund for employees' children, and Darnell had been at the center of it all, bringing his unique perspective to every decision. His first act as an executive had been to raise the wages of the cleaning and maintenance staff. His second had been to create a veterans hiring program. A knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. His assistant, Jenny, poked her head in. "Mr. Jackson, they're ready for you in the auditorium." Darnell nodded. "Thank you, Jenny. And please, after 6 months, I think you can call me Darnell." She smiled. "Old habits, sir. Mr. Porter is already there with the reporter." Darnell straightened his tie. He now owned several good suits, and picked up a folder from his desk. Today was an important day for Porter Investments. A major business magazine was doing a feature article on the company's transformation. He walked through the building. Employees greeted him warmly. Some were people he had cleaned floors for just a year ago. Now they treated him with respect, but also with the easy familiarity of someone they had known for years. In the auditorium, Frank was chatting with a woman with short brown hair who, Darnell assumed, was the reporter. When Frank saw Darnell, he waved him over. "Ah, here he is," Frank said warmly. "Clara, this is Darnell Jackson, the man I was telling you about. Darnell, this is Clara Chen from Business Weekly." Darnell shook the reporter's hand. "Nice to meet you, Ms. Chen." "Please call me Clara," she replied. "Mr. Porter has been singing your praises. I understand you were the janitor here before becoming an executive?" Darnell nodded. "For 15 years. That's quite a career change," Clara said. "How did it happen?" Frank and Darnell exchanged a look, remembering that stormy night a year ago. "It's a long story," Darnell began, "but it started with a fall from a chair and a sprained ankle." Over the next hour, they told Clara their story, how Darnell had helped the injured Frank, how their friendship had grown, and how they had saved the company together. Clara took notes rapidly, her eyes growing wider with each new detail. "This is incredible," she said when they finished. "A janitor and a billionaire working together to save a company and change corporate culture. It's like something from a movie." "It's been quite a year," Frank agreed. "But we're just getting started. Darnell, would you like to share our new initiative?" Darnell opened his folder. "We're announcing the Marlene Jackson Foundation today, named after my late wife. It will provide healthcare advocacy and support for families facing serious illnesses." He handed Clara a press release. "Too many families face what my wife and I faced, fighting both the disease and the healthcare system at the same time. The foundation will start with a $50 million endowment," Frank added. "It's the first of several community initiatives we're launching this year." Clara looked impressed. "Mr. Porter, many business leaders would have been bitter after nearly losing their company. Instead, you've doubled down on employee welfare and community support. Why?" Frank looked at Darnell. "Because I learned from Darnell that the true value of any organization isn't in its profit margins or stock price. It's in the people who build it day by day, and the communities they serve." After the interview, Frank and Darnell walked through the building together. They stopped at the newly renovated employee cafeteria, which now offered free healthy meals to all workers. The space was filled with people from every department eating together. "You know," Frank said as they watched the scene, "my father would have loved this. He started this company believing that business could be a force for good in the world." "I think he would be proud of what you've done," Darnell replied. Frank shook his head. "What we've done, Darnell? I couldn't have done any of this without you." They continued their walk, stopping to chat with employees along the way. Frank had made it a point to know everyone's names now, following Darnell's example. When they reached the executive floor, a young man was waiting by Darnell's office. He jumped up when he saw them. "Dad!" Darnell smiled broadly. "Kevin? I didn't know you were coming by today." Kevin Jackson, now a college graduate, hugged his father. He had grown into a confident young man over the past year. "I wanted to surprise you," Kevin said. He shook Frank's hand. "Good to see you, Mr. Porter." "How's the engineering job treating you?" Frank asked. "It's amazing," Kevin replied enthusiastically. "The team at Porter Tech has been great. I'm learning so much." After Kevin had graduated, Frank had offered him a position at Porter Investments' technology division. Kevin had initially been hesitant, not wanting special treatment because of his father, but Frank had assured him the offer was based solely on his impressive academic record. "Is Lisa coming for the foundation announcement tomorrow?" Frank asked, referring to Darnell's daughter. Darnell nodded. "She's flying in tonight. She's excited about heading up the medical advocacy team for the foundation." Lisa had left her nursing job in Chicago to join the Marlene Jackson Foundation as its medical director. Her experience as a nurse gave her unique insight into the challenges families faced in the healthcare system. Later that evening, Darnell returned to his office to finish some paperwork. As he sat at his desk, he noticed his old janitor's uniform hanging in a frame on the wall. Frank had insisted he keep it as a reminder of where he came from. Beside it hung Darnell's military medals, including the Bronze Star he had received for saving 6 wounded soldiers under fire in Afghanistan. For years, those medals had sat in a drawer, painful reminders of a time he wanted to forget. Now they were displayed proudly, part of the journey that had brought him here. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. It was Frank. "Still working?" Frank asked, leaning against the doorframe. "Just finishing up," Darnell replied. "Big day tomorrow with the foundation launch." Frank nodded, then walked into the office and sat down. "I've been thinking about that night when you found me with a sprained ankle. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't been working that night?" Darnell considered the question. "I believe things happen for a reason, Frank. Maybe we were meant to meet." "Maybe so," Frank agreed. "Either way, I'm grateful every day that you decided to help a stranger in need." "Just doing what anyone would do," Darnell said with a small smile, echoing what he had said on that first night. Frank laughed. "That's what makes you special, Darnell. You really believe that. But not everyone would have done what you did, not just helping me to the hospital, but standing by me when the company was in trouble, speaking up when it mattered most." Darnell looked at the photos on his desk. His late wife, Marlene, his children, Lisa and Kevin, and a new one of the entire Porter Investments team taken at the holiday party. In the center stood Frank and Darnell, looking more like old friends than boss and employee. "You know," Darnell said thoughtfully, "when Marlene died, I thought the most meaningful part of my life was over. I was just going through the motions, cleaning floors at night, trying to help my kids when I could." He looked up at Frank. "I never imagined I would be here doing work that matters, making a real difference." "That's the thing about life," Frank replied. "You never know when everything will change. Sometimes all it takes is a chance meeting, a simple act of kindness." Darnell nodded in agreement. As they sat together in comfortable silence, he thought about how far he had come, from a night janitor to a respected executive, from a grieving widower to the founder of a foundation that would help countless families. And it had all started because he had stopped to help an injured man one stormy night, never imagining that the man would turn out to be a billionaire who would change his life forever. Sometimes the most important people in our lives are the ones we least expect. And sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can lead to the biggest changes.